Senator Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lucas, I would like to start with you. Your response to an earlier question made it sound like you don't believe that the EEOC is an independent agency. I just want to confirm your position on this.
That's correct. The EEOC is not an independent agency. And in fact, every single one of the former Democrat members that were terminated by President Trump, they know that. They know that, and so do colleagues across the decades. Since the 1970s, the EEOC's Office of Legal Counsel, as well as the Department of Justice's Legal Counsel, has held that we are an executive branch agency. In fact, to rule otherwise or to conclude otherwise would make us unconstitutional because we accepted jurisdiction over the ADEA, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act in the 1970s, and since then, the only way that could be constitutional would be for us to be an executive branch agency. We've accordingly complied with that for decades.
So I just want to ask you, in terms of your own work, has anyone from the White House or elsewhere in the executive branch urged or suggested to you or your staff to dismiss a case, take on a specific case, or decide in a certain way?
Respectfully, Senator, I cannot breach deliberative privilege or attorney-client privilege or Title VII confidentiality, so I'm unable to be responsive to your question.
So you can't say a simple no on that?
To answer your question would require me to breach the privileges.
Well, I guess maybe I'll frame it in a different way. Would that be appropriate? Would it be appropriate for the White House to tell you to take on a certain case, dismiss a certain case, or to rule in a certain way?
I can't engage in hypotheticals. I can say
look, it's not a hypothetical because you're saying to me that you are not an independent agency. You report to who?
I report to the president.
So if the president gave you a directive, what would you do?
It would depend on what the directive was, but I report to the president.
So you report to the president, you take directive from the president?
I do take directives from the president.
Correct.
Yes.
So if the president issued a directive saying that he wants you to take on, and look, I will just say whoever the president is, because if you go through this term, it could very well be another president, you have to follow that directive.
If the president gives me a lawful directive, which I'm confident that he would do, then I would obey that directive. And I think it is entirely appropriate for the president to direct the enforcement actions of the agency.
So it's entirely appropriate for a president to tell you that the president wants you to dismiss a particular case.
Again, the president directed us to comply with the law, and we're doing so.
Is it within the law for you to be able to dismiss a case?
The agency has prosecutorial discretion at all times.
Correct. So I just want to point out the damages and the challenges of what happens if you are moving away from this idea of some independence. The EEOC is founded upon this idea of protecting rights for all Americans, correct?
It is.
The civil rights for all Americans.
Yes.
So there comes a problem, though, if your agency does not have credibility as being one derived from a sense of fairness and instead can come at the whim of potential coercive influence or political whim. So I just want to point out to you where I see the faults of what you're saying in terms of EEOC not being an independent agency. I think the American people will lose credibility, lose trust in the EEOC because you have a very particular role. And I wanted to be able to explain to you and the American people what the problem would arise in. You know, the fact that you are saying that the president is your boss, that you take direction from the president, and if the president tells you to dismiss a case or to go after a particular employer or to rule in a particular way, I just find that to be a dangerous place for us and our government and our democracy.
Respectfully, decades, for 30, 40 years, the agency has taken this consistent position. It's done okay in that time, and I'm confident it'll continue to do okay. But I think the American people should be delighted at the idea that President Trump is leading with an amazing vision for civil rights for all Americans, and that should thrill them. That he is, again, as many have said, seeking to restore the golden age of worker and dismantling the identity politics that have been present far too often at the EEOC.
Well, I just want to remind you that, you know, your boss is not the president. Your boss is the American people, and that we swear an oath to the Constitution, not to a particular president. And I will hope that you fulfill that oath. With that, I'll yield back.
Senator